Hello everyone, welcome. We're just going to give it a few more minutes before we kick off. Just while people are joining, we're just going to be giving it another moment or so before we continue. You can see more people coming in. We're just going to give it another moment or so while we're joining, and then we can kick off the presentation. Okay, while we have more people grouping together, just a few reminders for the chat for everybody to read through, a few housekeeping items. Just for those who are joining, if you can read through the housekeeping items, we are going to kick off in a few minutes, a few moments, not too far away. Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Protiviti's Cyber Awareness Month webinar series, which tackles cyber vigilance, ensuring safety in the digital age. My name is Lauren Cave, an Associate Director in our Digital Identity and Cyber team, and I will be your facilitator for this exciting series of 5 webinars designed to enhance your understanding and awareness of some very topical and relatable areas of cyber risk. This is the second webinar in our Cyber Awareness series, and I'd like to thank you all for joining today to learn more about how to protect yourself, organization, and family in our increasingly digital world. Over the next few weeks, we're going to be covering a range of topics critical to maintaining cybersecurity both at work and at home. Our expert speakers will share insights, best practices, and practical tips that can be implemented immediately. Please do ask questions throughout the presentation using the Q&A feature. We will have a few minutes at the end of the session to address as many questions as possible. Last week, we covered the topic of keeping your executive safe from cyber threats, and today's webinar is on protecting our older population from cyber threats with our expert speakers, Roland Carandang and Ryan O'Flynn, who are both members of our cybersecurity team. While we're still grouping, there are a couple of questions we'd love for you to answer. So, question 1. Which factor do you think most significantly contributes to the vulnerability of seniors to cyber threats? If you can select which answer, A, B, C, or D from the list. if you're just joining us, we've just got a question we'd love for you to answer. So which factor do you think most significantly contributes to the vulnerability of seniors to cyber threats? Please select A, B, C, or D. Okay, so limited experience with technology and lack of awareness about cyber scams are hitting our largest numbers there. So if we move to the next question, in your opinion, which form of cyber threat is most likely to target our senior population? Telephony scams, phishing emails, malicious websites, or social media exploitation? So again, if you can select A, B, C, or D in your opinion. Okay, telephony scams and phishing emails. So these are all areas of vulnerability that are going to be discussed in greater detail today. So with that, I'm going to hand you over to Ryan O'Flynn. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Lauren, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So let's get into the meat of the presentation. So first of all, just to frame the conversation, when we were thinking about Cybersecurity Awareness Month and what kind of topics we might cover, we thought this was an important subject, and there's a few reasons for that. I think more broadly, whether you're running a business that depends on technology to operate, whether you're just an individual at home using a PC or a tablet, or perhaps just a couple that has a landline and nothing else. In all of those cases, you're going to be targeted at some point and possibly on an ongoing basis by a range of security threats. And unfortunately, that does include some of the most vulnerable people in our society, the elderly. While we were thinking this through, I was pondering about how most of these kind of the older generations, they've lived through an incredible revolution in technology over the past 20, 30 years, normally as adults. But even with that being the case, I think certain individuals have been kind of left behind in some regards in terms of their kind of understanding and comfort with technology. Just to kind of put that into perspective, I always kind of remember when my granddad passed away a number of years ago now, and we all tried to encourage my grandma to get a mobile phone. We were going to get it for her and set it all up so we could, stay connected. We could video call, we could share photos and things. And she was having none of it. She hated the idea and she completely rejected it. Certainly not everyone's like that, but I do think there's a level of kind of discomfort. Things are moving so fast. I think some people get left behind. I think about, myself, as I grew up, the kind of Nokia 3210 was like the cream of the crop. And remember when Matrix movie came out and they had this kind of black flip out one that kind of blew everyone's mind. And obviously now that's all old school stuff, and things continue developing very quickly. So with that said, what are the main kind of threats that we see out there? So there's kind of the usual suspects that everyone's probably familiar with, at work and at home. So things like email phishing, scam websites, text message based scams, and various things that we'll see on social media as well. But one thing that really jumped out when we were doing the research, which you can see in the side panel there, some research done by a charity Re-engage with the University of Portsmouth in 2023, they actually found that 2/3 of older people had been targeted, and actually the majority of those were through telephony. So, landlines, mobile and text, which I found really interesting. The other thing that kind of drove this home for me was there was a lady in my local community who came and knocked on my door one day, basically asked me to have a look at her computer. So I guess someone had told her, what line of business I was in, but she basically explained she'd had this phone call. Someone had convinced her that they needed to access her computer, and then there was later a large payment made, which unfortunately she fell for. And this is a fit and very sharp lady. So it's kind of interesting. So if we just get into a little bit about kind of what to look out for in terms of the red flags. So first of all, the number one thing we advise is awareness. And obviously, I guess that's why we have Cyber Awareness Month. But whether, in our line of business, we're often working with various sizes of organization, and we might be helping with strategy or implementing technology or whatever. But some common theme that always comes up when we look at security is actually people. Humans are inherently trusting a lot of the time, certainly emotional, prone to fear and greed and worry and other emotional responses. And that's actually a thing that we refer to as social engineering, which is basically about manipulating people, trying to get them to take an action, click a link, open an email, send some information without really thinking too much about it. And that's usually with some sort of reward or negative consequence if they don't do that. So the best thing you can really do is kind of raise your own awareness of these things. Obviously, it will help you in your own life and at work. And then have conversations, share information, share examples, encourage people to talk, encourage people to seek a second opinion if they're not too comfortable or sure about something. So let's get into kind of how these things typically play out. So first of all, there's a few common themes across all of these. So generally, there's some sort of contact made, which is unexpected, normally uncharacteristic of the source that it's claiming to be from. They generally are trying the social engineering angle, so they're trying to get an emotional reaction, making you think there might be a negative consequence, or again that you stand to benefit if you act quickly. And then they basically lead on to the point, which is trying to request personal data or private information, maybe passwords or login details, maybe bank details or card details, or sometimes to install malicious software as well. So we'll just get into these a little bit more. With telephony, a pretty common mode of operation there is basically calls claiming to be from Microsoft or a computer provider, saying there's a virus and that they need to access your machine to clean it. Other very common ones are claiming to be from maybe your bank and asking you to confirm some details before they can speak to you about your account. Also HMRC, which might be claiming that you're owed a rebate, or maybe that you need to make a payment. They can withhold their caller ID, and in some cases they can actually fake the name that shows up when they're calling. Mobile phones are getting better at kind of picking this up now, so you'll often see a call coming through and it'll say suspected spam or scam. They're obviously always playing catch up because the attackers can just switch numbers and for a period of time they go undetected. One of the big red flags, which I've experienced myself, is a lot of these things are actually, they're kind of auto dialing sequentially or through every number in the phone book. And it's only once somebody answers that they then kind of connect you. So you'll answer the call, you say hello, you'll hear a silent pause, and then you'll hear a background noise pick up, and then somebody starts speaking. And that's a pretty big giveaway for both marketing and more malicious contact. There's also text message. So myself and actually my wife in the last 2 weeks have both received a text that claimed to be related to a penalty notice. And obviously my initial reaction was, oh dear, what have I done? a better click to pay half the price rather than waiting 30 days. And then obviously I slowed it down. I had to look at it. I realized that the link looked dodgy, and the message didn't seem quite right. So there's a lot of that around at the moment. With phishing, again, they're unsolicited emails. They're claiming to be from a trusted entity. So again, common things are bank, HMRC, utility companies. They'll relate to a kind of security issue with your account. There's also quite a lot going around that relate to either, say, an order or a payment or a delivery. So I know a lot of people are placing a lot of orders, especially my wife, and expecting deliveries. So they'll be interested in that. Others who maybe aren't expecting that, it's going to worry them. They're going to think somebody's got into their account. So again, they may kind of emotionally just click on that to see what's going on. The emails can be made to look very real. They can basically take a real email, copy the content, and modify some details, and it can look exactly the same as the real thing. The main red flag with these to look out for is that the email address for the sender is wrong. This can be kind of hard to spot because a lot of apps, especially on mobile, they'll show the display name. So it might say, first name, last name, rather than the actual address. And it is very, very easy to spoof that display name to make it look like something that's trusted. Going back, whenever we gave security training, we used to talk a lot about spelling and grammar. Obviously, if you get an email and it's supposedly from the bank and it's full of typos, that's a pretty good flag. However, they are getting a lot better using online translation software and even AI to form, properly worded, officially sounding emails and translate them into various languages. So malicious websites. These are obviously websites that have been registered and are intended to either, defraud or capture private information. So often they'll be within the phishing email or the text message, but not always. They can also use techniques like registering domains that are very similar or that contain common typos, or just registering a fake website and then using advertising or kind of optimization on Google to make it appear in the search results, particularly around kind of Christmas and Black Friday when you've got people shopping for high value goods. These things pop up and of course the goods are paid for but never received. Again, these can look very legitimate. They can do what they call scraping, which is just copying the content of the site and again changing some details. Obviously, the padlock is important. So when you're on a website, you want to see that padlock, especially if you're putting any personal information. However, that's not just a bulletproof guarantee that it is trustworthy. All it really means is the information's encrypted. Anyone can register a domain, and once you own a domain, you can quite easily get a certificate that gives you that padlock. So it's something else to be aware of. And then social media, lastly, is an interesting one because it kind of takes elements from all of these. You've obviously got people being able to post public content that you might come across. You have, direct messaging, which can obviously be used for, again, kind of phishing and sending malicious links. There's also third-party ad content that they don't control directly, but again can be linking to scams and other things. A little more sinister as well. People can obviously create fake profiles with fake pictures, and in some cases use that to kind of build up a bit of a relationship over time, which they might then later exploit. And another one I see a lot of is fake profiles. So a lot of famous people and profiles with a lot of followers, they'll have a lot of problems with kind of bots where people will have fake profiles that look just the same, and they'll then comment and reply to people. So you might be, say, liking a BBC good food recipe or something, and then you may get a reply that has the same picture and a very similar name that says something like, "Great, if you like that, click here for more." And you do have to be very careful on checking what those links are before you click them. Actually, we had an issue a few weeks ago where one of my wife's friends had posted that she had some spare Taylor Swift tickets, and after displaying an interest, became very pushy about transferring the money to her bank. And then we started to smell that it was a bit dodgy. And then actually her sister messaged and said, look, her account's been hacked into and they're trying to spam all of her contacts. So yeah, lots going on there. So appreciate that's a lot of information. So I'm going to pass over to Roland, who will kind of summarize that a little bit for us and then talk a bit about, okay, so what can you do if you actually see these things in practice?
Thank you so much for that, Ryan. So yes, let's just recap on that. These are some major red flags for you to educate your loved ones on. And importantly, these will often present in combination, as Ryan alluded to, particularly around things like social media. So the first one, just any unexpected request for information. It's just worth noting here that, and we often talk about this in the corporate world, but your data, your loved one's data, is in many ways the most valuable asset in this market, and we should very much treat it as that. The second one here, to me, is probably the most effective. So urgent calls to action, people getting pushy with you to act on something that could be quite damaging if you don't. It's effective not just for the elderly, but I have a friend of mine in their 20s who fell victim to this urgent call for action recently and had their whole bank account cleared. This person worked for a very large company, and as it turns out, they had a whole department set up to help protect people and help them recover from scams like this. So this is a really vital one to educate your loved ones on. The next one here, requesting personal data where it shouldn't be needed. So there could be situations where you are engaged by a legitimate company, but asking for information that you just don't need. And Ryan mentioned this before, things like passwords or banking details should never be asked for or provided through those channels. Spelling and grammar mistakes, I agree with Ryan, this is becoming less of a thing than it used to be. Things like generative AI have made it easier for scammers to put together more convincing communications. And the last one here, I'm just changing it in the order because I think it's a great overarching one, is things that are too good to be true. So these scams, if they're not trying to scare you into preventing something very damaging from happening, they're offering something to you. And I think the old adage here definitely holds true. If something seems too good to be true, assume that it is. So what are some things that we can do? So if it's in the phone, just hang up. If you're concerned it might be something relevant, just find the official number from that correspondence. Your bank cards, as Ryan mentioned before, checkbooks, for those of you who still have those, and the official website. Call them and find out what happened and if they need anything from you. If it's an email, don't click the links, don't open attachments, don't enter any information on the website, and don't respond. Again, go directly to the official source if you're concerned. For websites, again, Ryan mentioned this, look for the padlock. To me, that's a little bit of an advanced advice to give to an older person, but check the address carefully. And I really do like Ryan's advice here about verifying the address. It would be very unlikely for a spoofed site to show up in your search engine's first few pages. And if people are looking for their bank, for example, it certainly would show up right away. And last but not least, social media. Again, all of the above really apply. Be wary of any links, usernames, unsolicited contact. I agree with Ryan also in his language. These to me, because they can build actual relationships or fraudulent relationships with you, are to me the more sinister of the attacks that can happen, particularly to an older person. So just some closing thoughts before we move into some questions and answers. So today, we've learned about some of the threats facing older people and some techniques we can help them use to protect themselves. Technology can be a wonderful thing. It can help people stay connected, including some of the more isolated people in our society. And if we all do our bit, we can help our older population enjoy the benefits of the digital age while staying safe at the same time. Just one other thought on this. So the majority of people on this webinar are looking after older people as opposed to being older people yourselves. As I was preparing for this session, I thought about some advice that I'd received in the past. And actually, I recalled something from an event like this that was actually for children and online safety. So the main advice there, and there was a lot of good advice there, was just to get engaged with your children. So in their case, it might be playing video games with them, seeing how they engage with strangers through chats, exploring social media together. I think this advice actually is quite relevant also for the older generation, and suggest that we all engage with them as well. So if they're not playing video games, if they are, great, play with them. But if they are exploring online banking for the first time, maybe reviewing their emails, just get involved. I think for emails, I've recently been through some of my junk box, for example, and it's shocking what you'll find there. As Ryan mentioned, mobile phones, as well as, and I'll add to that, email providers are getting very good at catching a lot of the low-hanging fruit, the obvious scams. But if you look through those, you could give a good example of what people can expect to occasionally get through. So some good examples there to engage with your loved ones on. So with that, we are going to just pause now for questions, and I will hand back to Lauren to facilitate the Q&A. Thank you.
Yes, and we had a couple of questions that had been submitted to us earlier on this topic as well. So if I maybe start with the first one, what do I do if I get a call from the bank? How do I know if it's real, and should we use a VPN?
Okay, so we can probably break that one down a little bit. I think what I'd say is you probably can't be certain. So if in doubt, you're going to want to just hang up, as we said, find the official number and give them a call back. Obviously, what you don't want is to be providing private information, maybe passwords or memorable phrases, or indeed your actual bank account information to a cold caller. It's just too risky. So that's what I'd say on that point. On the VPN, I feel like there are certainly use cases, but I believe the way they're marketed often is misleading, in that if you're using it, you're completely protected. What it's doing is basically protecting the data from one point to another. But if you're accessing your email and you're getting phishing emails, you're still going to be seeing those. If you're accessing a malicious website, you're still going to get there. You're still going to put in your information. It just means it's kind of protected in between. So there are use cases, but I think a lot of excessive trust is put in that kind of technology sometimes, in the way it's marketed. Don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Roland.
I think you covered that well, Ryan. Thank you.
Okay, this next question is actually something that I can resonate with, and people that I know as well. How can the older population store passwords safely? It says, I know older people who write everything in a book. Is there a way to store these securely but keep it simple?
Interesting question. We probably should work out his answer in these. Yeah, it's a good question, because if people need to write things down to remember them, obviously in business it's an absolute no-no, but they need to basically make sure those are stored somewhere secure, where they're not going to be found. That's kind of the main thing. And I've got a friend who stores his passwords in that way, and he just makes sure he keeps the notebook stored in a physically secure and hard to find location. The other thing is, and this can be a bit a bit challenging and advanced, but obviously multi-factor authentication, if they have, say, access to a mobile phone where they can use a secondary code, then obviously that helps mitigate the risk of any passwords or credentials being compromised.
If I can just think about some of the older people in my community, I think the advice around passphrases could resonate specifically with that community. It's just something that could be easily memorable and used, I think, more safely than having shorter but compliant passwords and different ones across different platforms. So that's a personal view just based on some of the older people around me.
Okay, thank you both. We do have another question. So what steps can senior folks take to minimize number of cold calls that they receive?
That's a good question, Lauren. And thank you for that. This is one that I struggle with now, but for me, I've got the benefit of just ignoring most of the things that come through because I never expect phone calls to happen. I think to answer it more broadly, candidly, I don't know the direct answer to that. A lot of this is going to be around using your browsers and your phones to not accept or provide information to providers, and also just thinking about what you sign up for on anything online, bearing in mind that in addition to any cold calls you might receive or emails from that party, they're sharing it and they're also potentially losing it. So forgive me, I don't have a direct technical answer to that, but I think that's some broader advice there that might be relevant.
Yeah, and for kind of legitimate, I guess, marketing, at least in the UK, there are kind of registers that you can put your phone number on to basically opt out of marketing. Also, going back to the mobile phones, as I said, they are getting fairly good at knowing about spam and scam calls, and there are preferences on whether the phone's going to simply warn you or actually just block and reject and filter out those calls. So that's another option.
That's a great point, Ryan, and actually that's something I know, showing people how to actually do that on the phone is just demonstrating it, isn't it? But that does sound like a good way to do it. So with that does close out our questions. And as we wrap up today's insightful session, I'd like to thank our fantastic Protiviti speakers, Roland Carandang and Ryan O'Flynn, for sharing their expertise and knowledge. Just to highlight a few key topics from this webinar. So we've been shown some of those security threats that are prevalent for an aging population. We've also looked at how we can work to protect our older population as well. And we've covered some of those red flags that we need to be alert for and help educate those individuals who are most susceptible. We hope you found these insights informative and actionable and to be able to support the senior people that you know. As mentioned earlier, this is the second of our 5 cyber awareness webinars that we'll be hosting, so please join us for next week's session on keeping our customer identity safe, which will be next Wednesday at 1 p.m. BST time. If you haven't already, please select the QR code on screen to register to this webinar series. And if you've got any further questions, we'll be going to be sending a follow-up email to this webinar, which you can respond to. So once again, thank you all for joining us today. And whether it's through implementing today's tips or sparking discussions with peers about cybersecurity awareness, your engagement makes a difference. I hope you're looking forward to next week's webinar. Goodbye for now.